The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And good morning, everybody. This is Ray Hanania with the Ray Hanania Show here on Wednesday, June 9, 2021. It's 8 a.m. Eastern and 3 o'clock in the Middle East. The time zone's all over. We're broadcasting from Detroit, Michigan. I'm in Chicago. We have a guest in Egypt that we're going to be talking to in a second. And we're focused on Yemen this morning and the terrible violence there. This week, it was disclosed that a missile fired in a barrage of attacks by the Iranian Houthis struck and killed 17 people, including a young 5-year-old child, in a gas station in Marib City. Dozens more were injured, and I understand just a little while ago that even a second child was among the children killed. Then the Houthis, who were backed by the Iranians, attacked the ambulances that responded to the carnage. It's just shocking. But making it even more shocking is the silence about all this from the Western media. Very few Western media are covering this. They focus all about politics. They don't talk about what's actually happening on the ground. It's a terrible situation over there. I'm lucky we have a good guest that we're going to focus on. He writes for the Arab News. He's been in Yemen. He's covering that whole region, done some great stories, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute. But no outrages at all about the violence or that a baby was among those killed by the Iranian-backed Houthis. Where's the White House, the members of Congress, the U.S. news media? I invited all of them. I reached out to the State Department, the White House, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of the Foreign Relations Committee, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, called them all. They love to put out press releases, but I couldn't get them on to talk about this. So we're going to focus on our Arab News writer, firsthand, who's been covering this, Saeed Al-Batati. He's an Arab News reporter who's been covering the violence in Yemen and the lack of the outrage from the public over the recent violence there. He's written many stories about this incident. Later on this morning, in segment 2, we're going to be talking with Cornelia Mayer. She's also an Arab News op-ed columnist and business writer. She's going to talk about the Global Anti-Corruption Coalition, vaccinations in the Middle East, and the recent Aramco bond issue release. Cornelia is a business consultant, macroeconomist, and energy expert. But first, we're going to take a quick break here at the Ray Hanania Show, brought to you by Arab News at arabnews.com on the U.S. Arab Radio Network. We're broadcasting live on WNZK AM 690 in Greater Detroit and WDMV AM 700 in Greater Washington, D.C. We're streamed live on Facebook/Arab News and also on arabradio.us. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to be right back with our guest, Saeed Al-Batati, right after these ad messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you. At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frikeh, hoisin, grape leaves with steak, mashawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985. Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And welcome back to the Ray Hanania Show. It's described as a heartless terrorist act committed by the Iran-backed Houthis who deliberately fired a missile at a gas station, killing at least 17 people, including a 5-year-old child, Leon Tahir Mohammed. Then they fired another missile at the ambulances that came to the aid of the victims. It's just amazing. Arab News editor-in-chief Faisal Abbas writes in his op-ed column this week, Leon Tahir Mohammed suffered two misfortunes in her extremely short life. The first was that she was not lucky enough to have been living in a safer country such as the U.S., Japan, or France. The other was that she was born not long after the Iran-backed Houthis overthrew her country's legitimate government and started a savage, hellish war that they now refuse to end. We cannot know what her life would have been like, he wrote, had she survived, but it certainly would not have been easy under the Houthis. They do not hesitate to force children into service as soldiers. They treat women as second-class citizens. Just ask abducted model Entisar al-Hamadi. And their official slogan advocates death for all. I don't know how anybody could cover that, but we have a very courageous reporter, Saad El-Batati, on our Zoom, on the line, on radio this morning. He's a reporter with Arab News who's been covering the violence in Yemen and the lack of the outrage. Saeed, thank you so much for joining us from North Africa, up there in Egypt, I believe.
Yeah, I'm in Egypt now. Thank you, Ray, for having me today.
Tell us, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. I always like the audience to know who we're talking with. And the Arab News, we want to kind of put a focus on you because you've done so much writing, over the years, and this focus is so important. One of the few voices providing coverage of the story. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Basically based in southern Yemen, in a small city called Al-Mukalla, and I have been covering Yemen for almost 2 decades, for the local, regional, and international media outlets. I have been following the latest escalation of violence, and the Houthi took over of power in late 2014 since day one, and even covered the Houthi these sporadic wars between government and the Houthis since 2004.
And it has to be very, I don't know, covering a war zone as you do, that takes a lot of courage. I mean, are you worried about yourself? You know, when you go into this, what do you think about when you cover these stories?
Absolutely. That's right. You need much courage, but sometimes you didn't have any other options other than just covering the war and staying at home or staying in Yemen to cover the war. I was even in Al Mukalla, in my city, when AQAB Al Qaeda took over the city or stormed the city in April 2015. That was the hardest moment of my career, just reporting for Western media from inside AQAB controlled area. Yeah, but sometimes we assess risk, in areas where I cover stories, and then sometimes I drop some titles and some stories because of risk. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this most recent story, this violence that took place in Marib City. Tell us what happened.
That was the deadliest attack or Houthi strike in areas in Marib. A group of people, thousands of people, were queuing outside fuel station to refuel, and then there was that Tahir Muhammad and his daughter Liane. Suddenly, a missile strike. A ballistic missile, actually, what local people say, a ballistic missile, ripped through the area, triggering an explosion. And then when the people came on ambulances, first responders came to take the wounded. Another explosion occurred there. Some say it's due to a ballistic missile. Others say no, it is an explosive laden drone. The strike killed at least 21 people, according to official figures. And then this tragic or this horrible picture of a completely parent father hugging his daughter. Yeah.
And how did you cover that? Were you able to get there yourself, or did you have to go through contacts?
Through my contacts on the ground. I have contacts everywhere in Yemen, but it happened as I landed in here in Egypt. I want to have just to take a break from war, and I want to cover other things other than this deaths, like the model and other stories. Suddenly, I received this message from the people on the ground. And this graphic image of parent baby or parent child and her father. So I contacted my people on the ground, my friends on the ground, and yeah.
And you being Yemeni yourself, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it must be. This is horrible. This is happening to your own country. For you to see this, this happen to people, your own people.
Yeah.
Does it make it? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. This incident reminds me of another incident in January 2020 when the mood was high for a possible peace deal to end the war. Everyone was talking about the airstrikes by the Arab coalition or planes dropping significantly in 2020 in January. And then we thought, as the Yemenis, that we are close to, a settlement, peace settlement to end the war. Suddenly, a deadly a deadly ballistic missile strike by the Houthis killed more than 100 soldiers and civilians in Marib, in the same area. Now, people talking about heavy diplomatic efforts to end the war. we are happy that this war might come to an end soon because of these diplomatic efforts. And then suddenly this tragic incident happened in Marib, bringing us back to the same area.
Yeah, and it must be difficult because reaching these people, there's been so much suffering there, so much violence, every story being about death and destruction. That's got to be a terrible thing to have to cover. How do you prepare for a story like this? I mean, what do you wear? Like I've seen reporters in war zones sometimes wearing helmets, wearing flak jackets. Is it difficult to get around in Yemen? Is it hard for you to do that?
Yeah, it's hard for me to go to Houthi-controlled areas because of I'm covering Yemen for Saudi newspaper. It's difficult to go there. Then I usually move within these government-controlled areas, cross into Marib, for example, then to Eden, and these other areas. Usually, personally, we have our contacts on the ground, and then we contact them. We see it's not that difficult. It's not that dangerous to me as a Yemeni. I mean,
right.
It might be dangerous for the Western journalists coming to Yemen or other non-Yemenis, but we, as Yemenis, we know where are the dangerous areas, so we don't approach them.
Yeah, and in this segment, I wanted to kind of put a focus on you because I think that because of reporters like you, we're able to get the details, for things like this. And I want to ask you about why, how you feel about, I've read your stories. They're phenomenal. I don't see too many other people writing about the same topic. So we're gonna take a quick break. I have to do a quick radio break here, but when we come back, I want you to talk to me about, your feelings, about how you feel about, when you look at the media. You're a journalist. I'm a journalist. When you look at the broadness of the news media, it doesn't seem like people care about Yemen. I get the sense that they don't care. So let's take the break, and when we come back, I'd like to ask you about that. How do you feel and about the media, about everybody, about the world? Is Yemen getting the attention or not getting the attention? I'm Ray Hanania. You're listening to the Ray Hanania radio show here at WNZK AM 690 radio and also WDMV AM 700 radio in Washington, D.C. We're broadcasting live on Facebook at facebook.com/Arab News. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our interview with a very courageous reporter with the Arab News, Saeed Al-Batati. I'm Ray Hanania. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
While we've been staying safe at home, scientists have been on a journey. The destination, a COVID-19 vaccine. This journey began decades ago with research into other coronaviruses. Scientists built from there with months of research and development, cooperation with other experts worldwide, and clinical trials on tens of thousands of volunteers of diverse race, age, and health status. They arrived at a safe, effective vaccine, and hundreds of thousands in Michigan have already been vaccinated. But the next step is ours. We need to get the vaccine when we can. Keep wearing masks correctly and taking precautions until we reach our destination, freedom from COVID-19 and getting back to the lives we love. Discover the facts for yourself at michigan.gov/COVID vaccine. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263. The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And welcome back to the Ray Hanania Show. I'm Ray Hanania. We're speaking with Saeed Al-Batati, Arab News reporter who's been covering the violence, the shocking violence in Yemen, and the lack of outrage, the lack of coverage over the violence there. It's just shocking to me as a journalist for 45 years. Originally, I had a big show planned. I had all these guests. We were going to talk about some of the politics and some really good people that we were going to bring on. But after looking at it, realizing that we had a journalist who's right at the front line there in Yemen, I thought we should focus just on him during the segment on radio today, just to kind of talk about in detail. So Saeed, again, I appreciate you joining us. I know how rough it is. I know you're outside of Yemen right now in Egypt, calling us, and I'm so happy the internet is very connected over there. So Saeed, before the break, I had asked you to, what's your feeling about the react? I mean, you see all the newspaper media coverage in the Middle East, in the West. Are people covering this properly? Do people in Yemen feel that people care about them the way they care about other people everywhere else?
As a Yemeni, first and foremost, we don't see that much coverage. For example, this misunderstanding.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that. Saeed, I'll ask you to repeat that because there was a little disconnect with the internet there. It's no problem. But go ahead.
Okay. So generally, we're not happy. We're not happy.
And
mostly.
Go ahead. A little bit of internet interference. I'm so disappointed in the internet. Go ahead, Saeed. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no problem.
You're getting cut out. I want you to start again because what you have, I wanted to put the spotlight on you. So let's see. I think we have the internet is back for you. So let's go ahead and try it again.
Yeah. You mentioned something about phonemic, reporting or stories that it is because of the. Hello.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's. Is we have of the case with the other media publications. I don't know why, but if that airstrike, or sorry, missile strike or deadly missile strike in Marib happened somewhere by the Arab coalition warplanes, or it would have received much coverage than this. Yeah,
they would have made it. They would have made it political, the media, rather than about human beings. Correct?
Yeah, I didn't. If you look at that Marib on Saturday, other than news wires, you will not find much coverage. And you can ask the government, the United States, you can ask the American media, they didn't cover that missile attack in Marib. I don't know, but Yemen is not giving much attention like other conflicts in the region, like Syria. I don't know why, but this is what we see. They didn't have appetite for covering Yemen.
Yeah, and your stories are really important because they put a spotlight on a topic we're not talking about enough. The people in Yemen, the suffering that they go through, the violence that we see there, the interference from Iran, all of that.
Yeah.
It seems like, that if the world and the media doesn't put a spotlight on it, nobody's going to care. Nothing will get done. I wonder if that has an impact on the fact that the Houthis don't feel a need to compromise, to come to the peace table, to, end the violence. It doesn't seem like they want to do it. There's no pressure on them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Not much pressure on the Houthis or other warring factions because of the lack of media coverage that expose the real situation.
Yeah, I feel bad because the internet. I wonder, what, Saeed, just because we got a few minutes left in your segment, let's turn off the video and just do the audio. Maybe that'll make it easier to get that in there. Let's do that. Try turning your video off.
Let's stop off.
Yeah,
now?
And let's see. Yeah, let's go ahead. I can hear you well. So go ahead, Saeed. I mean, it just seems like with no coverage, there's no pressure on the Houthis. And with no pressure on the Houthis, there's nothing's going to actually change for the better for Yemen.
Yeah, absolutely. On Marib, and then these missile attacks of their landmine. Hello?
Yeah, Saeed, listen, I am really sorry about this connection. We're going to have to do this again at one point because I'm determined to help put a spotlight on Yemen.
Thanks.
And just any final thoughts before we say thank you for joining us this morning?
Thank you so much for having me today. And then we hope that there will be much coverage on.
All right, Saeed. Listen, I know we've lost you.
And other areas at the same.
Saeed, listen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry about the interruptions there with the internet.
No problem.
But we appreciate you joining us there, and we wish you the best. I'm looking forward to your stories on Yemen in Arab News. Saeed Al-Batati. Thank you, Saeed.
Thanks.
All right, buddy. All right, this is Ray Hanania. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to bring on our next guest, Cornelia, who is a economist, and Cornelia Meyer, who's an op-ed columnist, an economist, and business writer. We're going to talk about global anti-corruption, the Global Anti-Corruption Coalition, vaccinations in the Middle East, and the recent Aramco bond issue release that was just put out. It's a major and significant thing. We have Cornelia on the line, and she has issues with her connection, but I know that she's going to do very, very well, Cornelia. So we will get you right on here right after these messages here at the Ray Hanania Show. We'll be right back right after this third break.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, and seafood dinners. Plus, they offer big trays of your favorite food and so much more. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab is located at 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills and is open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So stop in or call Kashat's today at 248-538-9552. That number again, 248-538-9552. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied. When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
The U.S. Arab Radio Network is proud to offer the Ray Hanania Show with veteran journalist Ray Hanania, the U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. U.S. Arab Radio broadcasts content Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV 700 in Washington, D.C., and simulcast through stations around the country. Programs will rerun from 5 till 6 p.m. Visit us on Facebook at U.S. Arab Radio. And we're also streaming live on Facebook.com/Arab News.
And of course, when we talk about radio, it is live. That means whatever happens, happens. We had a great guest on in our first segment, Saeed El-Batati, and he was calling us and connecting from Egypt. He's been covering the violence in Yemen. It's such a major story. And of course, I wanted to do my best to put a spotlight on it by focusing just on him. I had other guests I was going to bring on, and it's just the way it is, the way it happens. His voice is so important, and I wanted to make sure that people heard him. We were able to get some of the interview on the air, but toward the end there, his internet did have some difficulties. So my best laid plans, go amiss. What are you going to do? That's the way radio is, radio verite. It's part of the news business, and it just happens. Welcome back to the Ray Hanania Show. It's always interesting, but I'm happy to welcome our next guest, Cornelia Meyer. She's an Arab News op-ed columnist and business writer, to talk about the Global Anti-Corruption Coalition, vaccinations in the Middle East, and the recent Aramco bond issue release. She just wrote a story that's being published in Arab News, why and how the U.S. bipartisan support to counter China's technology advancements matters to the world at large. Cornelia, I know you can't come on with video, but you are on the line with us. Thank you so much for waiting being patient and joining us as I frustrate my way through technical difficulties.
Thank you, Ray. Can you hear me, Ray?
Yes, I can. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Sabah al-khair, it's great to be on with you. And what would you like to talk about first?
Well, let's talk first. Give us a little overview about this Global Anti-Corruption Coalition, and then let's talk about some of your recent stories after that. What is the Global Anti-Corruption Coalition? What is that?
It's actually very important because it shows both two things. It shows that the world is finally coming together to fight corruption on a global international level. Because so far, yes, there has been OECD and UN initiatives, but a lot of it has been in confined to countries. And corruption is really global because as people launder their corrupt money, it clearly goes across borders. And that's where the Global Anti-Corruption Initiative comes in, and it shows on one hand how the world can cooperate on it under the under UN leadership, but also the great leadership that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has taken during its G20 presidency. Because that's when this global network of anti-corruption law enforcement authorities called Global E, which is virtually located in Vienna, has been brought together by KSA, and it's also funded by the kingdom.
And has it been productive?
Well, it's been launched on the 2nd of June, so I think we may just need to give it more than 8 days to become productive. But I'm sure it will be, because it brings together the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime. It brings together the OECD efforts. It also brings together national efforts. So in that sense, it's good. And to have it on a virtual platform is really good. And especially also to have it funded, because, with these great efforts, if they don't have the funding, it's words only, and no actions will follow.
Now, we always focus on violence and terrorism and death and destruction around the world, as we were trying to do in our first segment, but corruption is a major problem.
Corruption is a huge problem. And what corruption takes? Corruption makes very few people very rich at the expense of the majority of people. And if you look at what corruption will take away from the GDP of, especially less developed countries, it's just, these are staggering numbers.
And just a reminder, our listeners, we have Cornelia on the line. If you're listening on radio, you're hearing her voice loud and clear. If you're watching us on our Zoom, we don't have her video, we just have her voice. But Cornelia is an Arab News op-ed columnist, business writer. She's a business consultant, macroeconomist, and energy expert, and she's giving us some insight into some of the big stories that she's written for Arab News newspaper. This anti-corruption coalition, it sounds like that's the first time, I don't recall, hearing the UN engaging in something so broad before.
Well, there is the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime, which has looked at this. But I think this anti-corruption initiative has really brought it, this global E, as they call it, has really brought it to the next step. And what I find is terribly important is that it's the UN agencies that collaborate, the OECD, other multilateral efforts, and they bring in the national the national law enforcement agencies. So it brings everything together, which really is important as a platform. You need to start somewhere, and to have as broad a platform as possible is probably a great place to start.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people, when we talk about drugs and crime, we just assume corruption. But there's no focus on corruption itself as a criminal enterprise. We talk about illegal drug use. We talk about criminal activity. But corruption by itself, being put on a pedestal like this, I think is, kind of a unique effort to really kind of crack down on some of the bigger problems that corruption wraps itself around, like drugs, like violence, like crime. So it is unique.
Well, it is. And, corruption is broader than just drug and crimes, because when you look at what corruption does, it takes away tax revenue. It avoids tax revenue, which countries, especially developing countries, could use to build up their infrastructure, to build up their health infrastructure, education, all of those things. So every dollar that's taken away from governments, from countries through corruption is a dollar that you're depriving the poorest segments of the population of.
Yeah, I remember.
I used to work for the Asian Development Bank, and I still have that development banker DNA in me, although I then went on to become an investment banker and an industrialist. But if you look at it from that perspective, this is so important from a development perspective.
I know, having been a political reporter for many years, I remember talking with law enforcement about how the media and the public need to focus on corruption as a separate crime, because corruption, as you point out, is broader than just the guy who sells the drugs, the guy or woman who uses the drugs. It's about the system that allows the sale of drugs to happen. So corruption is such a broad and very important aspect. It's interesting. So this global anti-corruption coalition, do we know some of the other countries that are involved at the UN in this coalition?
Well, it's basically most of the UN countries that are involved, and it has
Everybody.
the broad endorsement of the G20. And you really have to congratulate KSA, the King of Saudi Arabia, for starting the initiative, because this is a tough subject, and it takes courage to bring up a tough subject in the middle of a pandemic when so many other issues are there. So, but if you don't bring up those subjects, if you don't, you need to, as they say in tennis, you need to watch the ball. If you don't watch the ball through all the ups and downs of economic up and downs, political up and downs, pandemics and so on, you'll never get anywhere.
No wonder I'm not a very good tennis player, because I don't watch the ball. I should. We're on the line with Cornelia Meyer, Arab News op-ed columnist, business writer. She's a business consultant, macroeconomist, and energy expert. And you have been writing about a lot of other topics. As you mentioned, there are a lot of other things going on in the world. Vaccinations, that is something that's been on our mind, right, for 18 months now? What's happening with that?
Well, it's been on our minds, and we're making great progress in the developed world. Again, more than 60% of Israelis are vaccinated. About 55% of U.S. citizens, or more than 50% of U.S. citizens got their first jab. 50% of UK citizens got their first jab. But then when you look at the developing world, it's really bad. You have about 13% of Indians having received their first jab as of June 6, and less than 2% of the population in Africa. And when you talk to epidemiologists and people like that, they'll tell you, unless we vaccinate the whole world, we'll have more and more vicious mutants, developing. So it's really important that the rich, again, it's about the rich taking care of the poor.
And I know that's the responsibility that the rich should have, but in reality, that you point out makes this whole coronavirus an even worse tragedy, that there's so many countries, that poorer third world countries, are not getting the vaccinations. Is it about money, or is it about politics? Why aren't these countries getting the vaccinations they need?
Well, it is mainly about money, and you look at it. I mean, it's the normal instinct of every government to say, I must protect my population first, my people come first. And so you look that the EU and the US have purchased vaccines a multiple of what they need for their populations, but they haven't given them on yet. You have COVAX, the UN initiative that was started, or the WHO UN initiative was started to vaccinate the world, which is under the auspices of another WHO alliance. Which has made great promises, but when I see that COVAX has distributed 77 million doses, I have to laugh, given that the EU and the US together have had by March, we're talking March, 3 months ago, about 2.5 billion doses. So we've got to do something about this.
Are the rich countries doing enough to help the poorer countries?
I don't think they are, and I think we should really be giving way of the many excess doses we have. We should donate. There is now the talk about suspending patent rights, right? Waiving the patent rights for vaccines, but that's very difficult, because how did we get to the vaccines? It is because private enterprise, because these pharma countries, biotech companies, put a lot of money into research and created them in short order. So if we say, okay, we waive the patent rights, or we force licensing agreements at minimal expense, that's nice. And on one hand, emotionally, I understand it. But then when I look at it intellectually, I say, this is really the debate of what is a global public good. And is it allowable for a global public good to have a patent on it if we assume a vaccine is a global public good?
We're on the line with Cornelia Meyer, Arab News op-ed columnist and business writer. We've talked about Global Anti-Corruption Coalition, the challenges of the vaccination in the coronavirus world, the poorer countries, third world countries, not barely vaccinating their citizens. And Cornelia, I think you make a great point that, we can't take that for granted, because if we ignore the poorer countries and the third world countries and we just vaccinate ourselves, the virus will never be defeated. It'll be out there. It'll get worse. And the threat against the people who think that they're safe will continue. So I guess there's a moral obligation of these countries. We need to make sure that the poorer countries are as vaccinated, as high of a rate as they are in countries like the United States, which, by the way, I think the president this week said that we're not going to reach our goals that he had said we were going to reach in terms of vaccinations. So it's a very difficult process. That doesn't sound very good for everybody, does it?
No, it doesn't sound very good. And we have, it's again, we're coming back. I don't play tennis, but I just love you have got to watch the ball. We need to watch the ball. And we need to work on it. And I think the one thing that the one statistic that really resonated with me, and which I'd written about a few weeks back, is the IMF came out and said, if everybody, the rich countries, spend $50 billion and we vaccinate everybody across the globe, by 2025, the global economy will have benefited to the tune of $9 trillion. So this is not just a Pollyannic, let's be nice to people. It's in the economic interest of everybody.
Now, switching subjects a little bit, tell us about this story that you just you published, about the U.S. Senate. Everybody came together. When you think the U.S. is very divided, it's polarized, actually. There's so much space between the right and the left. Nobody comes together for anything anymore in this country, but it seems like they did come together when it came to pass a bill to bolster technological and industrial capacity in the technology and innovation space. Was that the case, or was that just a fluke?
No, it's not a fluke. And, there is one thing. There is nothing that will unite enemies like a common foe. And the common foe there is China. And everybody has seen just how China is the next big thing on the geopolitical and on the economic space, right? It's now the number 2 economy. It might have surpassed the US by 2028. So it is the next big thing. And Trump was already, had his own way of looking at this issue with trade sanctions. Biden has a more nuanced way of looking at it. And he really goes to where the heart is, technological advantage. So, yes, this was great because it was passed 68 to 32, which means in the Senate, which means a lot of Republicans who on the same day went against Joe Biden on the infrastructure program that he had proposed and where he had a major charm offensive last week. This common foe really focuses the minds of people.
So they came together, but that makes sense. I mean, on infrastructure becomes political. On China, the right is they're upset about China and the coronavirus, and there's all these concerns about what actual reality involved the spread of the origins and spread of the coronavirus. Coming from China, did it really come from China? All these questions become very, very difficult. Is it because they don't like China that everybody came together?
I think it's because they don't like China, but I think Biden was onto something else here. If I look at how much the U.S. government spent in terms of helping research and development in 1964, it was 2.2% of GDP. Last year, it was 0.7 or something percent. So there's really a need not to leave everything to the private sector. Yes, the U.S., look, I've spent 20 years of my life in some of the great U.S. corporations. So if there's anybody who's bought into corporate America, it's me. But it can't be that you just have the U.S. corporations driving development. You need to have the country involved there as well. And you look at China, you look at Russia, you look also at Europe. Governments are much more proactive in helping universities. So in that sense, through the back door, Biden got in his agenda of getting the state, again, more involved in helping universities and research institutions developing great new science.
And it seems that the purpose of this bill was to break the Chinese, control, I guess, or domination of this market, and that it would increase competitiveness. The Chinese are not happy about that, are they? Because it kind of cuts into a very big base that they've dominated.
Well, their language, if I listen to Xinhua, their their government press agency, was quite visceral, their response to the bill. And what I'm worried about more than how China and the US go against each other, I look very much at GCC, I look very much at the Middle East and at developing countries. What does this mean for GCC? What does this mean for the rest of the world? Because if we go down the track, which we might, of where if you are a GCC country or worse, even a developing country, you have to choose, am I choosing Chinese technology or US technology? That's quite dangerous. And then you look at the sovereign wealth funds. If they can only invest in US corporates and no longer in Chinese corporates, that's going to be quite difficult, I think, to be very polite about it.
We're on the line with Cornelia Meyer, Arab News op-ed columnist and business writer. We've talked about the Global Anti-Corruption Coalition with the UN and how it was started by the Kingdom and with their backing, and the problem of coronavirus vaccinations between the rich and the poor countries. And now talking about our most recent story, which we hopefully will see soon, about this effort to kind of break China's technology monopoly. That's what it sounds like. Did I get that wrong?
A little bit, because China doesn't have a technology monopoly, but the US is worried it might get there. Where I think it's less on the technology side, it's more on the semiconductor side and rare earth side. When I look at just how dependent, not just the US, the whole world is on semiconductors from China. Man, that's really that's a big thing. And I go back, I'm a very old woman. In 1986, or 1988, I was the advisor to the then Japanese Minister of Trade and Industry, who later became the Prime Minister. And we had what we called the semiconductor wars between the US and China, the Hando Taisenso. And I see we're going exactly down that track again.
Yeah, that's fascinating because, when you think about it, it's not on everybody's radar screen, but it really should be, because the potential to cause trouble, to control, to influence, our whole world is based on semiconductors. I don't think we could exist without them. And someone having such a massive monopoly on their production would be very dangerous, I think. Now, we had one other topic that I wanted you to touch on, this Aramco bond issue. We normally don't do a lot of business stories. That's why I'm trying to pack in a lot here, Cornelia. We're lucky to have Cornelia Meyer, an Arab News op-ed columnist, and she's a business consultant, macroeconomist, and energy expert. We usually have the politics, but we don't have enough business. So tell us about this Aramco bond issue.
Well, there is really a bonanza of GCC bond offerings. It's Aramco, it's the country of Oman, it's Bahrain, it's a bank in the UAE, it's a UAE federal bank. So it's a big thing. And the great thing is, again, right now, interest rates are very, very low in the US, and we don't know where they're going. You have a little bit of a dichotomy. You have Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Treasury, saying, well, maybe they need to go up, and the Fed chair not really being there yet, but at some stage they will go up. And you have a differential, so interest rates are still low, and the differential between emerging markets, which KSA is, and emerged markets, or these who have very low to negative interest rates, is the highest possible. So if you're an investor, this is a great time to go into something like an Aramco bond. And if you look at it from the Aramco perspective, it's probably as cheap as it will ever get. And the other thing that I think is really very important is it's the first time Aramco is coming out with a sukuk, with an Islamic bond, which is a brilliant move because there is so much demand for Islamic bonds across, not just across the Middle East, across also Malaysia and other countries, that they're appealing to another investor base than they usually are, which is, Aramco always amazes me at just how smartly they play things.
Listen, Cornelia Meyer, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I wish I had more time. I can't believe I'm saying this, to talk about business issues, being a political reporter, but it's been very fascinating, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ray.
Oh, of course. Cornelia Meyer, Arab News op-ed columnist, business writer, business consultant, macroeconomist, and energy expert. What's your Twitter handle if people want to follow you?
At Meyer Resources. Thank you for asking.
At Meyer, Meyer Resources. At Meyer Resources. Cornelia, thank you so much. And everybody out there in Radio Land, thank you for listening and watching. We want to thank our guest, Saeed El-Batati, for joining us. It was very difficult because of the internet. He was connecting from Egypt. We cleared the deck so I could focus on him. And it just didn't work out the way I wanted, but we'll get this right. Radio is always fascinating, exciting, and unexpected. I'm Ray Hanania. We'll see you again next Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern on the Ray Hanania Show. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.